What happens if you move abroad and you realize you've made a mistake, or perhaps even a ton of mistakes? Hi, I'm Zoe Smith, founder of the Exodus Collective, and if you're thinking about making a move abroad and worry that you need to get absolutely everything perfect, stay tuned to this video because I really want to talk about some of the mistakes that I've made in moving to Grenada, in the hope that being aware that mistakes happen and actually you can learn how to adjust to them is a reason that you can feel free to not feel overwhelmed, to not feel like you need to get absolutely everything perfect, like my speaking, and actually just take the plunge and understand what the likely hurdles you're likely to face if you choose to move abroad. So I moved to Grenada in summer of 2021. I should have moved back in 2020, but COVID had other plans for me. And so myself and my 3 children at the time, aged 10, 6, and 4, upsticks from the UK and moved to the Caribbean Spice Isle. And it wasn't the first time for us. I'd previously given it a trial run in 2015 when I was working as a consultant for an international development organization and able to be based from pretty much anywhere. I started the job working in London, realized that actually I wanted to be elsewhere and that I wanted to live in Grenada long term. So my then partner and I moved to Grenada. I was probably about 4 months pregnant at the time, and also had my son. And yeah, we kind of gave it a run, sent my son to school. I started a business. And it was really useful opportunity to get a sense of what living in Grenada long term would look like. So fast forward half a decade, and I'm back in Grenada, and having had that trial run really made me feel like I knew what I was doing. On top of that, I'd been coming to Grenada probably at least once or twice a year. I'd established friends here. The business was very slowly moving along, but I was not a newbie to the island. But yet, despite all of that, despite all of the preparation that I felt that I had, despite the fact that I knew where I'd be staying, where my kids would go to school, even still, with all of that, there were a multiplicity of things that, were just big mistakes. And I want to share what some of them are with you. So the first mistake that I think I made, and I'm going to go in reverse order, so stay tuned for the biggest one and let me know if you are surprised that I made the mistake. If you have made other mistakes in moving abroad, I'd love to get your thoughts. But for me, the first mistake I made was underestimating what a cultural adjustment it would be for my kids in moving to Grenada. So as I said before, my son came here when we were 4. He went to school, he made friends, and he had a pretty good time. There were moments at the beginning when he definitely was missing friends and family, and he would wake up crying for his grandma or crying for the dog that we left behind, and that was really heartbreaking. But for the most part, he had fun, he enjoyed himself, and he was just free to be in ways that he couldn't in London. But this time around, he's 10, now 11, and very much more vocal and has a very strong sense of who he is and what he wants in his life. And to be honest, moving to Grenada was something that he was not excited about from the beginning. He loves being in the UK. He loves having access to Amazon Prime, next day delivery, being able to go to the supermarket and get whatever you want, being able to go to the cinema whenever you want. And yeah, just, in terms of the consumerist stuff that younger kids like, young teens or teenagers like, of course, the UK has way more of that on offer than Grenada. So he's been very vocal that he doesn't like that. But to be honest, he's not the only one of my kids who at times has found Grenada really difficult. I remember one moment after we had like a hell of a journey to get here. I'll post a link to that video. We woke up and had the news that we were free to leave quarantine. So we walked down to the local beach and I took some lovely pictures of the kids swimming and having fun. It was like, a sigh of relief. We finally made it. And as we left, the kids were like, oh, it's so sandy. I hate the sand. I'm never coming to the beach again. I want to go back to England. I hate it. Oh, I'm so sandy. It's so itchy. And it was one of those moments where as a parent, you're just like, what have I created? Like, my children are freaking out about being on a beach after having been cooped up in London for, I don't know, a year and a half under COVID. And yeah, I'm still having to breathe through it now, but it was literally one of those moments where you just have to take things in perspective, understand that my experience isn't their experience, that the experience that they're vocalizing about in that moment isn't necessarily the full experience, and that the stuff that they love, they might be less vocal about than the stuff that they hate. But even with all of that said, it has been tough for the kids. It is tough for the kids. I remember sending them to a summer camp where they were pretty much the only kids who weren't Grenadian. My son saying that no one understood what he was saying, him getting teased for being English, there being a lot of swear words around, and that was something that he wasn't used to. There being a lot of homophobia, and a lot of religious stuff that, it's just really different. And as a parent, helping your child to navigate through those differences can be challenging, because on the one point you want them to respect the differences that other people have, but at the same hand you also want their differences to be respected. And pretty much anywhere we are in the world, that reciprocity of respect is something that I'm going to have as a base for my kids. And yeah, that has been tricky. And even in schools, I think I probably chose the most liberal, standard traditional schools that my kids could go to. And even there, for all of them, like, there's been a lot of adjustment. And it's tough because myself, I know who I am. And for many reasons, I wouldn't choose to work for a company here in Grenada because I just know the culture is so different. Yet I've chosen to expect my kids to be able to navigate something that I wouldn't particularly want. So that is something that I'm having to do a lot of reflection on. And yeah, I think not questioning that was a mistake, for sure. That was a mistake. To be honest, even at this stage, I don't 100% know what the solution looks like, what the correction looks like. I am having conversations with some other families here on the island to see what setting up an alternative education learning space might look like. But again, that's far from smooth and far from, easy. So yeah, as a parent moving abroad, making sure that your kids are happy it's a challenge. It's an opportunity, but let's be realistic. It's also a challenge too. So yeah, that's definitely mistake number one. Mistake number two is kind of linked to that, because I was so, set and sort of occupied with keeping the kids happy. I think a mistake that I didn't make is not taking time to carve time out for myself. I think parenting, when you are moving, when you're in a new country, there's a lot of firefighting. There's a lot of like, this one's having a tantrum, let's fix it. This one doesn't like the food, how do we solve that? This one needs new friends, how do we make that happen? So I've kind of felt, especially being in lockdown and needing to constantly entertain the kids, in autumn of last year, that their needs have definitely been the priority, and mine, that you just kind of just suck it up and deal with it. And I am definitely feeling like the long-term implications of that are very present. Sort of in my body, I feel that was a mistake. The stress, the tension, the feeling of depletion is really, really present. And understanding how to correct that again isn't simple. I think a lot of it has in part due to breaking bad practices from before. Even back in the UK, I wasn't necessarily good at putting my needs first. So in some ways, it definitely was a mistake to think, okay, I'm moving to a new country, and click, ka-ching, everything all of a sudden is going to unfold as it should. Like, no, you need to make conscious decisions, you need to put strategies in place, and you need to break that mold. There's only so much that a new destination is going to do for you. And all of this, I don't know why I'm saying you, I should be saying me, because this applies to me probably more so than anyone else. But yeah, if that resonates with you, let me know in the comments, because even making sure that I could do yoga, like I don't love yoga, but at least it would have been a way for me to get out and be healthy, meet other people. I think in November, I bought a 5-day yoga pass, and it's still sitting in the door of my car, unused. And it's not like I haven't had time. I have had time, but I just haven't made myself a priority. So at this point, holding space for myself absolutely is number one. What exactly that looks like is to be decided, but at least, meditating, doing my yoga nidra, making sure that I can go for a walk, getting out, and sort of just crossing stuff off the to-do list that doesn't necessarily need to be there absolutely is one of the ways that I'm looking to rectify what definitely was a mistake, and probably too much of a burden to put on a destination to fix stuff that I actually just need to consciously choose to do differently. Number 3 segues in some ways between the other two elements. Looking back at my bank balance and a few other things, I think I definitely made a number of mistakes in understanding how to segue between living as if you're on holiday and living real life. So again, going back to keeping the kids happy, because there was so much about aspects of Grenada that they didn't love, we ended up spending most of our time at a really lovely, amazing place that in fact is so amazing, I'm not going to name it on camera because I love the fact that it's not overridden with people. It's really private, it's got a lovely community feel, and we spend a lot of time there just because there are so many other families who've moved from all over the world and happen to be passing through there. So it has cottages where you can stay, a lovely swimming pool, a bar, a restaurant, and space for the kids to just go and explore. So at one point, we were there pretty much every day, eating out every day, swimming every day, and on my part, drinking every day. I found that there's a really big drinking culture in Grenada, not necessarily in the UK where everyone sits in a pub and knocks back pints, but just like alcohol is a part of daily living. And as someone who likes to drink more than I should, it was just so easy, plus the fact that the kids were entertained. And I don't regret it. I don't regret it because for sure it helped ease us into being here in a way that I really appreciate. But on the other hand, it has had implications on my budget. Eating out every single day, and also what I set up as the norm for the kids. Like we got the school reports at the end of the year, and there was, like, my daughter, there were many areas in which she wasn't really doing that well, and I think in large part that's because instead of like coming home and doing homework, we were going straight to swimming and mummy knocking back a few cocktails. Not to say that I'm an alcoholic, not to say that my kids need to be taken away from me, but that balance between how you would live back home versus how you live in a new destination, I think if anyone has any tips, negotiating that is really, really tricky, because just to like go cold turkey without any easing into a new life can be really hard, especially for kids. But at the same time, I think even if you've got tons of money, to live a holiday lifestyle can be a bit tricky too. So again, I'm negotiating the balance of what that looks like, what having fun yet dealing with responsibilities looks like in practice. For sure, it's not eating out every day. For sure, it's not necessarily my kids only making friends with international kids who are kind of here for 3 months or 6 months and then traveling on to the next island. But there's a bit of that, that's fun. So yeah, if you're thinking about moving and assuming that you're going to be living a holiday lifestyle, I think that's something to unpick. But at the same time, understanding what easing yourself into the process might look like for you and what will be helpful for you. in advance is really important, so you don't make that mistake when moving abroad that I have. Number 4, again linked to the previous one, is how to budget. I didn't have a budget when I came here, which is really, really stupid. But to be honest, I didn't have a budget in the UK either. I'm not financially irresponsible, but I don't really like structure. I like things being fluid. And again, eating out every day, just really not really bothered about how much things cost. That was a bit silly. That was probably a mistake. And, I think moving abroad, in many ways, it's a way to redesign your life and put in place things that probably should have been in place before. I mean, maybe most of you have your life way more together than I do. But for me, there were many areas of potential improvement that could have been made upon my life before. And I think part of moving to Grenada has been a way to sort of fix some of that, slowly but surely. But the budgeting one is one that wasn't really ever on my to-do list. It was there when I was sort of planning, okay, what my monthly expenses be like, how affordable is it going to be for me to live there. But once we got here, thinking, okay, how much should I be putting aside for savings? How much should I be putting aside for investments? How much should I be putting aside if we want to go to, I don't know, St. Lucia for the weekend? I didn't really do any of that. I sort of just spent. And now I'm regretting it. I am regretting spending it. Yeah, that was really, really silly. That was a mistake. So yeah, finding ways to take the sort of budget on paper as to, how affordable will my life be, and then actually sticking to that and tweaking it as you go along in your new life abroad, I think is really useful. I think there's many stories of folks who've moved abroad and managed to pay off their student loans because they're earning a good salary and able to spend a lot less in their new country. Grenada can be quite expensive, but there's no reason why I shouldn't save more here than I did in the UK. So that is something on my to fix list. Yeah, that was a mistake and one that I can fix quite easily. So yeah, don't make that same mistake as me. And the final one, which I think is probably the most important one, and maybe it's sort of echoed all the way through, maybe not, but it definitely feels like a really strong point, a strong learning point to me, is that I really thought I could hit the ground running. I quite like strategizing and planning and, sort of knowing what the future is going to look like. And the fact that I spent probably like a good year before I came here having weekly conversations with folks who'd made their move to the Caribbean really made me think like, yeah, I know what this is going to look like. I know what the hurdles are going to be, and this is what I want to do, and this is how I want to achieve it. And like, I'm that sort of person, and not to be that way is difficult for me. But in hindsight, I was overly ambitious and not that realistic in thinking that even with the experience that I would just be able to roll things out. The reality is I moved in the middle of a global pandemic. Like, there is no certainty about anything. The idea that I could just be like this one tunneling barrel of energy that was able to kind of create whatever she wanted whenever she wanted is silly. And there is a difference between being in Grenada for a 6 months amount of time, I mean, that's not short, but for a definite amount of time versus living here. Relationships take longer to build. The process of doing business is very different. Like, one thing I found really interesting is that in the UK, quite often, if you have a meeting with folks, you'll sit down and talk and like, this is what we're here to achieve and blah, 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 that's what you'll discuss. In Grenada, I found you'll sit down and you'll talk and you'll talk and you'll talk about stuff that has absolutely nothing to do with what you're actually there to talk about. And there's times where I found that incredibly frustrating. But I'm learning how to surrender into the fact that, I moved here for a reason. If I wanted it to be exactly the same as the UK, I could have stayed in the UK. So yeah, that thing of hitting the ground running, I don't fully know the ground. So how can I run on it? At best, I might be able to crawl. Sometimes I might be able to walk. Sometimes I'll need to sit down. But that for sure has been part of the learning curve, which I freaked out a little bit about at the end of the year. I was like, well, why? I've moved here. Why haven't I done this? Why hasn't that happened? Why have I not been able to achieve this? And I took the chance, the bold stance of, when I didn't have a ton of money, investing in a coach who I want to introduce you to because she's absolutely amazing. She's from Dominica. She practices yoga nidra, which is really key to me. She's also understands the gene keys, which is a wonderful framework for understanding life. And yeah, she's just amazing. And she kind of said to me, okay, like, yeah, there's stuff that you haven't achieved, but reflect on what you have been able to achieve. Compare where you are now with where you were 6, 12, 18 months ago, and are you happy with the progress that you've made? So that thing of learning to focus on gratitude for the small things rather than disappointment at the lack of big things, absolutely is a shift. And accepting the fact that hitting the ground running when you move abroad to a new country isn't realistic. And even if you move abroad to a country that you're familiar with, like, inevitably, for a certain period of time, I don't quite know how long because I'm still in it, there's going to be a transitional phase. Who you were at home is not going to be exactly the same as who you are in a new destination, but who you are going to be is still yet to come. And finding ways to be easy on yourself, to be honest with yourself, and to stay curious yet open, I think, is part of the process that I'm finding useful. It is far from perfect, as you'll probably notice from the infrequency of me posting videos, but I'm getting to the other side, and I just wanted to be really honest. I think it's really easy to be like, this is amazing, this is great, here's me on the beach, but like, it's not like that every day. Sometimes it's not like that every week. And I think sometimes we can learn as much from other people's mistakes as we can from the successes that we see on Instagram. So yeah, that's just me sharing with you. I might share a clip from a regrets piece that I did a few months ago. So comparing what I thought was a problem after 2 months to what I'm now aware is a problem and a mistake after 7 or 8 months. It might be interesting to compare the two. But yeah, if you have any questions, if you have any suggestions, if you'd like to offer any help, any words of wisdom, please do so in the comments. As always, I'd love it if you could share, like, comment, and turn on notifications for those of you who are already subscribing so you can get notified when fresh new content comes up. But really appreciate all of you sticking with me on this journey. Earlier we hit 3,000 subscribers, which is awesome considering that I haven't really put that much out for quite a while. But look forward to seeing how things progress and look forward to you being part of that journey. So thank you and see you next time.